You never notice the exact day your family becomes polite with you instead of close. Evelyn Harper whispered those words to herself at 1:14 in the morning while standing alone in her kitchen, the soft yellow light above the stove casting long shadows across the apartment walls. Outside her window, Chicago looked cold and sleepless. Rain slid slowly down the glass. Somewhere below, a siren echoed through the wet streets before disappearing into the distance. Evelyn held her phone with both hands like it weighed more than it should. She stared at her son Daniel's contact photo for a long moment before finally pressing call. The ringing sounded louder at night. Sharper somehow. 1 ring. 2. 3. Then voicemail. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly before speaking. Hey sweetheart, it's Mom. I just wanted to make sure you got home safe. Roads looked bad tonight. A small pause. Okay. Call me tomorrow when you can. Her voice stayed calm until the beep ended. Then silence returned so fast it almost hurt. She lowered the phone slowly and looked toward the tiny dining table beside the window. 2 mugs were already sitting there. 1 with tea. 1 empty. The second mug had become a habit after 40 years of marriage. Even 2 years after Robert passed away, part of her still reached for him without thinking. Evelyn walked over and poured tea into the empty mug anyway. Steam curled softly into the quiet apartment. The old jazz station near the refrigerator played low enough to sound distant. Same song. Same chair. Same silence. She sat down carefully, pulling her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. Her knees hurt more at night lately. 62 felt heavier during winter. On the table sat a birthday card she had bought 3 weeks earlier for her granddaughter Sophie. It still hadn't been mailed. Evelyn kept waiting for the right moment to send it. Truthfully, she wasn't sure if Sophie would even call after receiving it. Last year the girl forgot Evelyn's birthday entirely. Nobody meant to hurt her. That was the strange part. Daniel worked long hours downtown at some financial company Evelyn barely understood. Her daughter Melissa lived in Seattle now and always. Sounded rushed on the phone. Everyone was busy. Everyone was tired. That was the explanation she repeated to herself every night. Busy. Tired. Life moves fast. But loneliness moved slowly. That was worse. Evelyn picked up her phone again. No new messages. She opened the family group chat anyway. The last text she sent sat there from 3 days ago beside a small gray timestamp. Thinking about making my lasagna recipe Sunday, if anyone wants to stop by. Melissa had reacted with a heart emoji 12 hours later. Daniel never responded at all. Evelyn stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then quietly, almost automatically, she typed another message. Hope everyone got home safe tonight. She looked at it for a moment before pressing send. 3 little words appeared beneath it almost immediately. Seen by Melissa. Nothing else. Evelyn placed the phone face down beside her tea and looked out at the rainy city lights again. Unaware that somewhere across town, Daniel Harper was about to hear something that would change the way he saw his mother forever. The next morning, Evelyn woke up before sunrise the way she always did now. Not because she wanted to. Her body had simply forgotten how to sleep late after Robert died. The apartment felt colder in the mornings. Quieter too. She stood in the kitchen wearing thick wool socks and an oversized gray sweater, while the coffee machine slowly dripped into the same white ceramic mug she had used for nearly 20 years. Outside the window, Chicago looked pale and frozen under the early December sky. A city full of people. Millions of them. Yet somehow the silence inside apartment 7B always felt louder than the traffic below. Evelyn checked her phone before pouring cream into her coffee. No missed calls. No messages from Daniel. She stared at the screen for a few extra seconds anyway. Almost like she could will it to light up if she waited long enough. Nothing. She set the phone down gently and opened the refrigerator. Half a carton of milk. Yogurt cups. Leftover soup. A container of pasta salad she made 3 days earlier. She frowned slightly before closing the door again. Lately she had stopped cooking real meals. It felt strange spending 2 hours making dinner just to sit alone afterward. The apartment still smelled faintly like cinnamon from Thanksgiving even though it had been over a week. Evelyn had cooked enough food for 6 people that day. Turkey. Mashed potatoes. Her homemade cranberry sauce Daniel used to love as a teenager. At the last minute, Melissa called saying the kids had soccer practice. Daniel texted an hour later saying work ran late downtown. Rain check, Mom. That was all the message said. Rain check. Evelyn ended up eating reheated stuffing alone, while an old Christmas movie played quietly in the background. She never told the kids how long she sat at the table afterward. Sometimes she wondered if motherhood ended gradually instead of all at once. Like a photograph fading under sunlight year after year until the faces barely remained. At 10:30 that morning, Evelyn left the apartment to buy groceries. The elevator hummed softly as it descended from the 7th floor. Same hum. Same flickering hallway light. Mr. Bennett from apartment 3C smiled at her near the lobby mailboxes. Morning, Evelyn. She smiled back warmly. Good morning. They talked for nearly 5 minutes about the weather and the grocery store nearby changing ownership. Tiny conversation. Meaningless, really. Yet somehow it became the longest conversation Evelyn would have all day. At the grocery store, she pushed the cart slowly through aisles glowing under fluorescent lights. She paused in front of a family-size frozen lasagna before quietly reaching for the smaller one instead. Then she stopped, looked at it for a second, and placed it back. Her hand lingered on the freezer door longer than necessary. Nobody noticed. By evening, snow had started falling lightly outside her apartment windows. Evelyn sat on the couch beneath a warm blanket while soft jazz played again from the kitchen radio. Her phone rested beside her untouched. 8:23. 8:41. 9:15. Then suddenly the screen lit up. Evelyn reached for it immediately, her heart lifting for half a second before she saw the notification. Your package has been delivered. The smile disappeared from her face. Almost instantly, she leaned back slowly into the couch cushions and whispered something so quietly even she barely heard it. I miss when they needed me. Across the city, Daniel sat alone in his downtown office staring at a voicemail notification he still had not listened to from the night before. Daniel finally listened to the voicemail at nearly 10:05 that night while the rest of the office floor sat dark around him. Most people had gone home over an hour earlier, but the financial report spread across his desk still waited unfinished beneath the cold white lights of his downtown office. Outside the massive windows, snow drifted slowly between buildings while traffic crawled through the streets below like tiny rivers of red brake lights. Daniel loosened his tie and leaned back in his chair before pressing play almost absent-mindedly. Then he heard her voice. Hey sweetheart, it is Mom. I just wanted to make sure you got home safe. Soft. Gentle. Careful not to sound like a burden. Daniel stared down at his desk while the message continued. Okay. Call me tomorrow when you can. The voicemail ended after 11 seconds. 11 seconds. That was all. Yet something about it stayed in the room afterward. Daniel rubbed his face tiredly and checked the time. He realized suddenly that he could not remember the last full conversation he had with his mother that lasted more than 5 minutes. Most of their calls had become rushed lately. Quick check-ins between meetings. Everything okay? Yep. Love you. Love you too. Then silence again for another week. He opened his phone and scrolled upward through old text messages. Photos from birthdays. Holiday plans. Reminders about winter coats. Questions about whether he was eating enough vegetables. The farther he scrolled, the more the messages changed. His replies became shorter over the years. Less personal. More distracted. Running late. Busy today. We'll call tomorrow. Tomorrow rarely came. Daniel leaned back slowly and glanced at the framed family photo sitting near his computer monitor. It was taken almost 8 years earlier at Navy Pier during summer fireworks. His father still alive then. Evelyn smiling brightly between her children with one arm wrapped around Robert while little Sophie sat on her shoulders laughing at the camera. Everyone looked close in that picture. Warm. Safe somehow. Daniel swallowed hard before looking away. Across town, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table again with the television playing softly in the background. A cooking show she was not really watching. Her reading glasses rested low on her nose while she carefully wrote out Christmas cards with slow, neat handwriting. Melissa. Sophie. Daniel. She paused before writing Daniel's name on the envelope. For a second, her eyes drifted toward the empty chair beside the window. Robert always sat there after dinner with a newspaper folded in his lap. Sometimes she still caught herself listening for the sound of him clearing his throat from across the room. Funny how grief could make silence feel crowded. Evelyn folded the card carefully and slipped it into the envelope before reaching for her tea. Cold already. She sighed quietly and stood to warm it in the microwave. The apartment lights reflected softly against the dark windows while snow continued falling outside. Same winter. Same apartment. Same waiting. Meanwhile, Daniel remained frozen in his office chair staring at his phone. Then, without fully understanding why, he opened the family group chat again and noticed something he somehow missed before. Every recent conversation started with Evelyn. Every single one. And most of them ended there too. Saturday arrived wrapped in heavy gray clouds and wet snow melting against the sidewalks outside apartment 7B. Evelyn stood near the living room window holding a warm mug between both hands, while the city moved below her in blurred streaks of headlights and umbrellas. The radiator hissed softly beside the couch. Somewhere down the hallway, an elevator door opened and closed again. Same sounds. Same morning. She glanced toward the clock on the microwave. 10:14. Daniel usually slept late on weekends when he was younger. Evelyn still remembered the sound of him running into the kitchen at 16 years old asking if there were pancakes left. Back then the apartment felt smaller because life filled every corner of it. Shoes near the door. Laughter from the television. Someone always hungry. Someone always talking. Now even the refrigerator hum sounded lonely. Evelyn placed the mug down and opened the cabinet above the sink. Inside sat a stack of holiday plates she only used when family visited. Slowly, she reached for them one by one and carried them to the dining table. For plates. For cloth napkins. For glasses. Her movements felt automatic, like muscle memory refusing to accept reality. She had not told anyone she planned dinner tonight. Still, part of her prepared as if they might suddenly appear anyway. The apartment smelled faintly like garlic and onions by noon while soup simmered on the stove. Soft jazz played from the old radio near the window. Evelyn moved carefully through the kitchen, stopping now and then to rest her hand against the counter when her knees stiffened. She caught herself smiling briefly while slicing bread because for a few quiet minutes, the apartment almost felt alive again. Around 3 in the afternoon, her phone buzzed against the table. Evelyn turned immediately, hope rising too quickly inside her chest. But the message came from the pharmacy reminding her to refill a prescription. The smile faded almost instantly. She picked up the phone anyway and opened Daniel's contact photo. Her thumb hovered over the call button, then stopped. "He is busy," she whispered softly to herself. "Do not bother him." She locked the screen and set it back down. Across the city, Daniel sat inside a crowded coffee shop near his apartment scrolling through emails while people around him laughed over holiday shopping bags and oversized winter coats. He barely noticed the noise anymore. His mind kept drifting back to his mother's voicemail from 2 nights earlier. Something about her voice stayed with him. Not sadness exactly. More like exhaustion. Quiet exhaustion. The kind people carried when they stopped expecting anything to change. Daniel opened the family group chat again without thinking. The last message still sat there unanswered. "Hope everyone got home safe tonight." He stared at it longer this time. Then slowly he scrolled. Farther upward. Birthday wishes. Recipes. Weather warnings. Photos of old family ornaments she found while cleaning. Tiny attempts to stay connected. Tiny conversations left hanging in silence. Daniel suddenly realized something uncomfortable. His mother had become careful around them. Every message sounded lighter than it should. Smaller somehow, like she was trying not to take up space in her own family anymore. Back inside apartment 7B, evening settled over the city early. Evelyn lit the small candle near the dining table, just as snow started falling harder outside the windows. 4 bowls remained arranged neatly beside steaming soup. 8 o'clock came and went quietly. Then 8:30. By 9:15 the soup had gone cold. Evelyn stared at the empty chairs for a long moment before finally standing up and carrying 3 untouched bowls back into the kitchen alone. The next morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of spoons clinking softly inside the kitchen sink. For half a second, still trapped between sleep and memory, she thought Robert was making coffee again. Her eyes opened slowly to the pale winter light stretching across the bedroom walls before reality settled back into place. Quiet apartment. Empty hallway. No footsteps except her own. She stayed in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling while snow continued falling outside the windows. There were mornings lately when getting up felt unnecessary. Not because she was unhappy exactly. Just unseen. Like a lamp left glowing in a room nobody entered anymore. By 10 o'clock, Evelyn sat wrapped in a blanket near the living room window with an old photo album resting open across her lap. The pages smelled faintly like dust and cardboard. Family vacations in Michigan. Daniel holding a fishing pole at age 11. Melissa smiling beside a birthday cake with missing front teeth. Robert grilling hamburgers on the tiny balcony years before management banned charcoal grills. Evelyn traced her fingers lightly over one photograph where everyone sat crowded around the same dining table, now standing mostly empty in her apartment. She remembered that night clearly. Loud laughter. Burned dinner rolls. Sophie. Falling asleep on Robert's shoulder while snow fell outside just like today. Back then she used to complain the apartment was too noisy. Funny what people miss later. Her phone buzzed suddenly against the couch cushion beside her. Evelyn reached for it quickly enough to spill part of her tea onto the blanket. A smile appeared immediately when she saw Daniel's name lighting up the screen. She answered almost too fast. Isuadhart. Her voice sounded brighter than it had in days. Daniel sat in his car outside another office building downtown, fingers tightening slightly around the steering wheel. Hey Mom. Small silence. Sorry I missed your call the other night. Evelyn looked down at the photo album resting in her lap. Oh, that is okay. I know you are busy. Busy again. Always busy. Daniel noticed how quickly she said it, almost before he could apologize properly. Like she needed to protect him from guilt before it even arrived. Snow tapped softly against his windshield while traffic crawled past outside. How are you doing? He asked quietly. Evelyn glanced around the apartment before answering. The candle from last night still sat melted beside the dining table. 3 untouched dinner bowls waited in the sink because she had not felt like washing them yet. I am good, she said gently. Just keeping warm. Another silence settled between them. Not hostile. Just unfamiliar. Like two people searching carefully for the right distance between them. Daniel rubbed his jaw slowly. What are you up to today? Evelyn smiled faintly at the question because nobody had asked her that in a while. Looking through old photo albums mostly. Oh yeah. Your father used to take too many pictures. That made Daniel laugh softly for the first time all week. The sound caught Evelyn off guard in the best way. Warm. Familiar. For a few seconds the years between them felt smaller. Then another notification flashed across Daniel's dashboard screen. Work meeting in 15 minutes. He sighed quietly without meaning to. Evelyn heard it immediately. Mothers always did. You should go, she said softly. I know you are busy. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Mom, but she interrupted gently before he could finish. It was nice hearing your voice, sweetheart. After the call ended, Evelyn sat motionless for a long time holding the silent phone in both hands. Then slowly, almost automatically, she opened the photo album again and whispered toward the empty apartment. At least he called today. By the middle of December, the city had settled into that quiet stretch before Christmas when everything looked warm from the outside. Store windows glowed gold against the snow. Couples carried shopping bags through crowded sidewalks. Apartment balconies flickered with white lights and wreaths. But inside apartment 7B, the evening still arrived too early and stayed too long. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table carefully wrapping presents she might not even get to hand out herself. Thin silver paper covered the table beside tape, ribbon, and a pair of reading glasses sliding slowly down her nose. Sophie's gift sat nearest to her. A soft blue sweater Evelyn found on sale 3 weeks earlier. She remembered Sophie loving blue as a little girl because it matched the lake near their summer cabin in Michigan. Evelyn smiled faintly at the memory before folding the wrapping paper carefully around the box. Everything she did now seemed careful, quiet, measured, like someone trying not to disturb an already empty room. The jazz station played softly again from the old radio near the stove. Same music, same warm kitchen light, same untouched chair near the window. Her phone rested beside the scissors on the table, silent for most of the afternoon. Around 4:30, it buzzed suddenly with a family group notification. Evelyn reached for it immediately, her heartbeat lifting before she even read the message. Melissa had sent photos from a holiday gathering in Seattle. Sophie smiling beside a giant Christmas tree. Melissa's husband holding hot chocolate near a fireplace. Cousins gathered together under glowing lights. Evelyn stared at the pictures longer than she meant to. Then her eyes slowly shifted downward. Comments filled the screen beneath the photos. Beautiful decorations. Looks amazing. Wish we could be there. Daniel had even replied with laughing emojis and a joke about burnt marshmallows. Evelyn blinked once. Twice. Her fingers tightened slightly around the phone. Nobody had invited her. Not even by accident. She sat motionless for several seconds while the jazz music continued softly behind her. Then slowly, almost automatically, she typed beneath the photos. Looks beautiful, sweetheart. Everyone looks so happy. Melissa reacted with a heart emoji almost instantly. Nothing else followed. Evelyn placed the phone face down on the table and stared at the half-wrapped sweater in front of her. For the first time all day, the apartment felt cold again. Across town, Daniel stood in line at a crowded grocery store scrolling distractedly through emails when Melissa's holiday photos appeared on his screen too. He smiled briefly at Sophie's goofy pose near the Christmas tree before suddenly noticing his mother's comment sitting alone underneath the pictures. Looks beautiful, sweetheart. Everyone looks so happy. Something about the sentence bothered him immediately. Not the words themselves. The distance inside them. Formal somehow. Like his mother had become a guest watching her own family from outside a window. Daniel frowned slightly and clicked into the group chat again. That was when he realized something worse. There had been another family thread for months now. One without Evelyn in it. Schedules. Holiday plans. Weekend dinners. Birthday arrangements. Nobody created it to hurt her. It had simply happened over time. Convenience. Faster replies. Less confusion. Yet suddenly Daniel imagined his mother sitting alone in her apartment seeing photos from gatherings she never even knew existed. The thought hit him harder than he expected. Back in apartment 7B, Evelyn quietly finished wrapping Sophie's sweater before writing the girl's name carefully on the tag. Then she reached for another box and paused. It belonged to Daniel. A dark green scarf she bought after noticing his old one looked worn during Thanksgiving last year. Evelyn held the box gently in both hands before whispering toward the empty apartment, "I still know your favorite color." The room stayed silent except for the soft crackle of jazz playing. Somewhere in the background, 3 nights before Christmas, Daniel could not sleep. The city outside his apartment looked washed in blue light from passing traffic while snow drifted slowly past the windows. Nearly 1 in the morning. Most of Chicago had gone quiet except for the occasional sound of distant sirens and the heating pipes ticking softly inside the walls. Daniel sat alone on his couch with his laptop open across the coffee table, half watching an old basketball game without really seeing it. His phone rested beside him. He picked it up twice, put it down twice. Then finally, almost without thinking, he opened his mother's contact again. His thumb hovered over the call button before he stopped himself. Too late to call. She was probably asleep. At least he hoped she was. Instead, he clicked into old voicemail messages again. The same one from a few nights earlier waited there untouched after he replayed it so many times the words almost sounded memorized now. "Hey sweetheart. I just wanted to make sure you got home safe." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Then another memory surfaced suddenly. His mother waiting by the apartment window when he was 10 years old during a snowstorm because his school bus arrived late. She had stood outside in boots without gloves for nearly 20 minutes just to make sure he got home safely. Back then, he never questioned whether someone would be waiting for him. Some forms of love became invisible only after they stopped surrounding you every day. Across town inside apartment 7B, Evelyn sat awake too. A soft lamp glowed near the couch while the television played muted infomercials nobody intentionally watched at that hour. She wore thick socks and one of Robert's old sweaters that still carried the faint smell of cedar after all these years. Sleep had become difficult lately. Nights stretched longer when there was nobody left to say goodnight to. Evelyn carefully folded laundry beside the warm hum of the radiator. One towel. One blanket. One set of dishes drying near the sink. Her entire life seemed reduced to smaller portions now. Smaller meals. Smaller conversations. Smaller expectations. She stood slowly and walked toward the hallway closet, searching for an extra blanket, when something slipped from the top shelf and landed softly at her feet. A small camcorder. Old silver model. Dust gathered along the edges. Evelyn stared at it quietly before kneeling down with stiff knees to pick it up. Robert used to record everything. Birthday candles. Family dinners. Random Tuesday mornings when the kids were little and dancing around the kitchen half asleep before school. Evelyn carried the camcorder carefully back to the couch and pressed the power button out of curiosity. To her surprise, it still worked. Static flickered briefly across the tiny screen before an old video appeared. Daniel at 17 years old laughing while trying to carve Thanksgiving turkey beside Robert. Melissa teasing him from behind the camera. Evelyn herself younger then. Brighter somehow. The apartment loud with overlapping voices and warm light. Evelyn smiled softly at first. Then tears slowly filled her eyes before she even noticed them coming. Not dramatic tears. Just quiet ones sliding down her cheeks while the old video continued playing in the dark apartment. She lowered the volume instinctively even though nobody else lived there. Some habit stayed forever. Suddenly the camcorder battery glitched, jumping ahead randomly through old recordings before freezing on something unexpected. Evelyn frowned slightly and leaned closer to the screen. It was Daniel. Much older. Sitting alone in what looked like his office downtown. The video timestamp showed nearly 8 months earlier. He must have accidentally recorded himself while testing the old camera during one of his visits. Daniel looked exhausted in the clip. Tie loosened. Eyes tired. Then his voice quietly filled the apartment. I should call Mom more. Evelyn froze completely. The screen flickered once. Then the video ended. The next morning, Evelyn replayed the short camcorder clip 3 more times before finally setting the device down beside her coffee. I should call Mom more. Such a simple sentence. Barely 5 seconds long. Yet it stayed with her all morning like warmth slowly returning to cold hands. Outside the apartment windows, snow rested heavy across rooftops while weak winter sunlight filtered through gray clouds. The city looked softer after snowfall. Quieter too. Evelyn stood near the sink washing the same coffee mug she always used when her phone suddenly buzzed against the counter. Daniel. Her heart jumped so quickly she nearly dropped the dish towel. Hi, sweetheart, she answered immediately. Daniel sat in his office parking garage gripping the steering wheel while warm air blasted softly from the vents. He had been sitting there nearly 10 minutes already trying to decide whether to call. Hey, Mom. Small pause. Did I wake you? Evelyn smiled faintly. At my age? I have already been awake for hours. Daniel laughed softly again. The sound felt less strained this time. More natural. Listen, he began carefully. I was thinking maybe I could stop by sometime this week. Evelyn froze for half a second. Really? The word escaped too quickly before she could soften it. Daniel noticed immediately. Yeah, if that is okay. Of course it is okay. She turned slowly toward the living room as if suddenly seeing the apartment through someone else's eyes. The folded blankets. The stack of unopened mail. Robert's sweater draped across the couch arm. I would like that very much. Daniel nodded quietly to himself. Maybe Thursday night after work? Thursday sounds perfect. After the call ended, Evelyn remained standing in the kitchen staring at the silent phone in her hand. Then something unexpected happened. For the first time in weeks, she opened the curtains all the way instead of leaving them half closed against the gray winter sky. Light spilled deeper into the apartment immediately. Dust floated softly through the warm beams near the bookshelf. The apartment looked older in full daylight, but somehow more alive too. Evelyn spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning with slow but determined energy. Fresh towels in the bathroom, vacuum lines across the carpet. She even polished the dining table Robert built nearly 30 years earlier when money was tight, and they could not afford furniture from the stores downtown. By evening, soft jazz played through the apartment again while chicken soup simmered gently on the stove. Same music. Same kitchen. But tonight the waiting felt different somehow. Across town, Daniel worked late again beneath bright office lights and endless spreadsheets spread across his desk. Yet his concentration kept drifting elsewhere. Toward memories he had not thought about in years. His mother standing in freezing weather outside hockey practice holding hot chocolate in paper cups. His mother staying awake until midnight helping him finish history projects. His mother always answering the phone no matter what hour he called. Funny how certain forms of love became so constant people stopped seeing them entirely. Around 8:30 that night, Daniel opened social media absent-mindedly, while eating takeout alone at his desk. Melissa had uploaded another family photo from Seattle. Smiling faces, Christmas cookies, holiday music playing somewhere in the background. Daniel looked at the picture for several seconds before suddenly realizing something uncomfortable again. Their mother would probably spend Christmas Eve alone this year unless someone changed that. The thought settled heavily inside his chest. Then another memory surfaced unexpectedly. 2 winters earlier after Robert's funeral, Evelyn standing quietly beside the apartment elevator telling Daniel, "Do not worry about me, sweetheart. I know everyone has their own lives." At the time he believed her. Now he was not so sure anymore. Thursday arrived colder than expected. Wind pushed hard against the buildings downtown while thin snow swirled through the streets in uneven waves. By late afternoon, the city lights already reflected against icy sidewalks like it was much later than it really was. Inside apartment 7B, Evelyn checked the clock for the 4th time in 20 minutes. 6:10. Daniel said he would come after work. She had repeated those words quietly to herself all day like something fragile she was afraid to break. The apartment smelled warm from chicken soup simmering on low heat beside fresh bread wrapped carefully in a towel near the stove. Evelyn even wore lipstick for the first time in months. Nothing dramatic. Just enough color to make herself look less tired in the mirror. She stood near the bathroom sink earlier that afternoon staring at her reflection longer than usual. Gray strands near her temples. Fine lines around her eyes. A face shaped by years of worrying about other people before herself. Robert used to kiss her forehead every morning without fail before leaving for work. Funny how certain forms of affection disappeared from daily life so gradually you only notice them years later in silence. Around 6:30, Evelyn lit the small candle at the center of the dining table. 2 bowls sat waiting beside folded napkins. 2 glasses. 2 spoons resting neatly on the placemats Robert bought during a summer trip to Wisconsin decades earlier. The apartment looked softer in candlelight. Less lonely somehow. At 6:48, her phone buzzed suddenly against the table. Evelyn smiled immediately and reached for it. Then the smile faded before she even opened the message completely. Daniel. "Hey Mom. I am really sorry. Emergency meeting came up. I do not think I can make it tonight." Evelyn stared at the screen without moving. The soup continued bubbling softly behind her. Jazz drifted low from the radio near the window. Somewhere outside, an ambulance siren echoed through the snowy streets before fading away again. She read the message twice more. Then 3 times. Emergency meeting came up. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before finally typing back. "That is okay, sweetheart. Work comes first. We can do another night." She even added a smiley face at the end. Small. Harmless. Careful not to sound disappointed. Daniel read the reply immediately from his office downtown, while voices filled the conference room around him. Yet something about the message tightened painfully in his chest. Not anger. Worse. Understanding. He suddenly pictured the apartment exactly as it probably looked right now. 2 bowls on the table. Candeli. His mother pretending she had not been waiting all day. Daniel rubbed both hands across his face slowly, while people continued discussing financial projections around him like nothing important had happened. Across town, Evelyn stood motionless in the kitchen for several quiet seconds before finally walking to the stove and turning off the burner beneath the soup. Then she carried 1 bowl back into the cabinet. 1 glass too. 1 spoon. The movements felt practiced somehow. Like she had done this many times before. Same apartment. Same table. Same disappointment carefully folded into silence. She kept the candle burning anyway. While eating alone, Evelyn turned on an old black and white movie she had seen at least 20 times before. The television voices filled parts of the room that otherwise felt too empty at night. Halfway through dinner, her phone buzzed again unexpectedly. Evelyn looked down quickly, heart lifting despite herself. But it was only a weather alert warning about icy roads until midnight. She smiled faintly at her own reaction before placing the phone face down beside the untouched second bowl still sitting across from her. Then very softly, almost embarrassed by the thought itself, she whispered into the quiet apartment, "I still set the table for people who do not come anymore." Christmas Eve arrived beneath a pale gray sky that made the entire city look quieter than usual. Snow rested along fire escapes and apartment windowsills while church bells echoed faintly through the cold afternoon air downtown. Inside apartment 7B, Evelyn moved slowly through the kitchen preparing dinner for one person while pretending she was not. The old radio played soft Christmas music near the stove. Same warm light. Same careful silence. A small ham baked in the oven beside potatoes seasoned exactly the way Robert liked them years ago. Evelyn still cooked his favorite meals sometimes without realizing it until halfway through preparing them. Habit survived longer than grief did. Around 3 in the afternoon, Melissa called from Seattle while wrapping presents in the background. Children laughed somewhere behind her voice. "Merry Christmas, Mom." Evelyn smiled immediately despite the ache already sitting quietly inside her chest. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Melissa talked quickly about airport delays, Sophie's school concert, burnt sugar cookies, holiday traffic.
Fast conversation.
Distracted conversation. Evelyn listened more. Then she spoke. She had become good at that lately. "You should see the tree here," Melissa said warmly. "It is huge." Evelyn looked toward the tiny artificial tree glowing softly near her apartment window. "I am sure it is beautiful." Then came the pause Evelyn already expected before it arrived. "I am sorry we could not make it this year." Evelyn tightened her hand slightly around the phone cordless receiver. "Oh honey, it is okay. Really." She said the words gently enough to sound believable. Melissa exhaled softly in relief before continuing another story about holiday shopping. After the call ended, the apartment became painfully quiet again. Evelyn stood alone in the kitchen staring at the dark phone screen for several seconds before placing it back on the counter. Then she whispered something toward the empty room she would never admit out loud to her children. "I just wanted one Christmas dinner together." Evening settled slowly over Chicago while snow drifted past the apartment windows in soft white streaks. Down below, families hurried through icy sidewalks carrying gifts and grocery bags beneath glowing storefront lights. Evelyn set the dining table carefully anyway. 2 candles, cloth napkins, plates she only used during holidays. She even placed Robert's old watch beside the centerpiece without fully understanding why. Maybe because part of her still believed family traditions mattered even when nobody showed up anymore. At 7:15, the apartment buzzer suddenly rang. Evelyn froze. For one impossible second, her heart reacted before logic could catch up. She hurried toward the intercom almost breathless. "Hello." A familiar voice answered through static. "Hey Mom. Daniel." Evelyn pressed her hand against her chest immediately. "Daniel." "Yeah." Small pause. "Can I come up?" The elevator ride to the 7th floor felt longer than usual for Daniel, while snow melted slowly from his dark coat onto the floor beneath him. He carried no wrapped gifts.
No overnight bag.
Just exhaustion and guilt sitting heavily across his face. When the elevator doors opened, he saw his mother already waiting near apartment 7B with one hand still holding the door open. The hallway light flickered softly above her gray sweater. For a second neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn smiled in that small careful way mothers smiled when they did not want their happiness to scare someone away. "You made it," she whispered. Daniel looked past her shoulder into the apartment and immediately noticed the table already set for more than one person. Candlelight reflected warmly across polished dishes. The smell of baked ham filled the room. Everything looked prepared long before he arrived. Something inside his chest tightened painfully. Evelyn stepped aside gently.
"Come in, sweetheart."
"Dinner is still warm." The apartment felt different with another person inside it again. Warmer somehow. Fuller. Daniel sat across from Evelyn at the dining table while candlelight flickered softly between them, and snow drifted past the windows behind her. The old jazz station still played quietly near the kitchen, low enough to blend into the sound of silverware against plates. For a while neither of them spoke much. Not because they were uncomfortable exactly. More because too much time had passed since their last real dinner together. They had forgotten the rhythm of each other. Evelyn kept standing up every few minutes to refill Daniel's water glass or warm his soup even when it was already hot enough. Old habits. Mother habits. Daniel noticed her moving slower than he remembered. One hand resting lightly against the counter sometimes. Careful steps across the kitchen tile. He suddenly realized how long it had been since he truly looked at her instead of simply seeing her. "This tastes really good," he said quietly after a few bites. Evelyn smiled immediately. "You still like extra pepper just like your father." Daniel looked down at his bowl. Funny she still remembered details nobody else did anymore. After dinner, Evelyn carried dishes toward the sink despite Daniel insisting he would help. "Sit," she told him gently. "You work hard enough already." Daniel watched her from the table while warm water ran softly in the kitchen. The apartment looked exactly the same as it had during his childhood. Same curtains. Same bookshelf. Same tiny scratch on the hallway wall from when he crashed his bicycle indoors at age 13. Yet somehow everything felt smaller now. More fragile. His eyes drifted toward the camcorder resting near the couch. "You still have that thing?" he asked with a faint smile. Evelyn glanced over her shoulder. "Your father refused to throw it away." Daniel picked it up curiously while Evelyn dried plates beside the sink. The battery indicator still blinked weakly. He scrolled through old recordings absent-mindedly until familiar images flickered across the tiny screen. Birthday parties. Christmas mornings. Melissa singing terribly into a karaoke microphone while Robert laughed so hard the camera shook. Then another clip appeared unexpectedly. Evelyn sitting alone near the apartment window sometime late at night. Daniel frowned slightly. "What is this?" Evelyn turned quickly from the sink. "Oh." Her voice changed softly. "I did not know that recorded." Daniel pressed play before she could stop him. The video quality looked grainy under dim apartment light. Evelyn sat wrapped in a blanket near the couch speaking quietly toward the camera without realizing it was already recording. "I think the hardest part about getting older is becoming unnecessary so slowly you do not even notice it happening at first." Daniel froze completely. On screen, Evelyn gave a small tired smile while staring toward the rainy window beside her. "The children still love me. I know they do." A pause. "They just do not need me anymore." The apartment around them fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic outside. Daniel lowered the camcorder slowly. Evelyn stood motionless near the sink with the dish towel still folded tightly between her hands. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. "Mom," Daniel whispered. Evelyn shook her head gently before he could continue. "It is all right, sweetheart." But her voice sounded thinner now. Smaller somehow. Daniel stared at her for a long moment before quietly asking the question that had been growing inside him for weeks. "Why did you never tell us you were this lonely?" Evelyn finally looked up at him then. Candlelight reflected softly in her tired eyes while snow continued falling. "Outside apartment 7B. Because everybody already seems so busy surviving their own lives," she answered softly. "I did not want my sadness to become another thing you had to carry." Daniel stayed longer than he planned that night. Midnight passed quietly while snow continued collecting along the apartment windows, and the city outside softened beneath white streets and distant amber lights. The television remained muted. The jazz station still played softly from the kitchen radio. Same apartment. Same warm lamp near the couch. Yet something invisible between them had shifted. Evelyn sat curled beneath a blanket on one end of the couch, while Daniel leaned forward in the armchair Robert always used. The old camcorder rested silently on the coffee table between them now like an open wound nobody knew how to close again. For a long time neither of them spoke after Evelyn admitted how lonely she had become. Daniel kept staring at the floor while guilt moved slowly through him in waves too heavy to ignore anymore. He thought about all the missed dinners, the rushed phone calls, the birthdays he almost forgot, the second family group chat his mother was never part of. None of it happened because he stopped loving her. Somehow that realization made it worse. "I do not understand how this happened," Daniel finally whispered. Evelyn looked toward the snowy window before answering. "Life happened." Her voice carried no anger, only exhaustion. "After your father died, everybody drifted in different directions trying to survive their grief." Daniel rubbed both hands together slowly. "You should have told me." Evelyn smiled faintly at that. Sut smile. Tired smile. "Told you what exactly?" she asked gently. "That I missed my children every day?" The apartment fell quiet again. Daniel swallowed hard. Mom! Evelyn shook her head softly before he could apologize. I know you love me, sweetheart. She looked down at her hands resting in her lap. That is what made this so confusing. Snow tapped lightly against the windows while distant sirens echoed somewhere far below the building. Evelyn continued speaking carefully, like someone opening drawers she had kept closed for years. When you were little, I was needed every minute. Lunches, homework, hockey practice, nightmares, fevers. A small laugh escaped her softly. I used to dream about having quiet evenings someday. Daniel listened silently while candlelight flickered low across the apartment walls. Then one day the house became quiet, Evelyn whispered. And it stayed that way. Her eyes drifted toward the empty hallway leading to the bedrooms. At first I told myself everybody was just busy. Then months passed. Then years. She paused for a moment before adding very softly. Eventually you stop calling because you are afraid of sounding needy. Then people assume you are fine because you stopped calling. Daniel felt something crack open inside his chest hearing that. Not dramatic. Worse. Quiet understanding. He suddenly remembered every time his mother said, "Do not worry about me." Every smile that looked slightly too careful. Every message ending with a heart emoji instead of honesty. Evelyn had not hidden her loneliness because she wanted attention. She hid it because she was trying not to become a burden to people she loved. Daniel leaned back slowly and covered his face briefly with one hand. I am sorry, he whispered. Evelyn looked at him immediately. Sweetheart. No, he lowered his hand slowly. I think somewhere along the way I started treating you like you would always just be here waiting. His voice sounded smaller now. Honest. And I never stopped to think about what that waiting felt like for you. Evelyn stared at him quietly for several seconds before reaching across the space between them and resting her hand gently over his. Same gesture she used when he was sick as a child. Warm. Familiar. You came tonight, she whispered. That matters more than you know. Daniel looked down at her fragile hand resting over his and suddenly noticed how much older it seemed now. Thin skin. Faint tremble. Years he had not fully seen until this moment. Outside apartment 7B, snow continued falling silently over the sleeping city while inside. For the first time in a very long time, neither of them felt completely alone. The morning after Christmas arrived quietly inside. Apartment 7B. Pale winter sunlight stretched across the living room floor while snow rested softly along the edges of the windows outside. For the first time in years, there were 2 coffee mugs sitting in the sink instead of one. 2 blankets draped across the couch. 2 voices moving softly through the apartment instead of silence carrying everything alone. Daniel had fallen asleep in Robert's old armchair sometime after 2 in the morning, while an old movie played low on the television. Evelyn noticed him there before sunrise when she stepped quietly into the living room wearing thick socks and Robert's sweater. She stood still for a moment just watching her son sleep. Even at 40 years old, there were traces of the little boy she used to wake for school every winter morning. Same tired eyes. Same crease near his forehead when he slept too hard. Evelyn smiled softly to herself before walking toward the kitchen to start coffee. The apartment smelled warm again. Coffee. Cinnamon. Leftover Christmas dinner. Familiar things. Human things. Daniel woke slowly to the sound of dishes clinking gently in the kitchen. For one disoriented second he felt 12 years old again. Safe. Home. He sat up quietly beneath the blanket his mother must have placed over him sometime during the night. Across the room, the Christmas tree still glowed softly near the window even though daylight had already arrived. Evelyn turned when she heard movement behind her. Good morning, sweetheart. Daniel rubbed his face tiredly before smiling faintly. I cannot believe I fell asleep here. You used to fall asleep everywhere, Evelyn replied softly while pouring coffee into mugs. Your father once carried you home from a baseball game because you fell asleep holding a hot dog. Daniel laughed quietly. Real laugh this time. The kind that filled a room instead of disappearing quickly. He accepted the warm mug from her and noticed his favorite breakfast already sitting on the table. Toast slightly burnt at the edges exactly the way he liked it since childhood. Scrambled eggs with too much pepper. Tiny details she still remembered after all these years. They sat together near the apartment window while the city slowly woke outside beneath fresh snow. Traffic moved carefully through icy streets below. A neighbor somewhere down the hallway vacuumed loudly for a few minutes before silence returned again. Same apartment. Same winter light. Yet the loneliness that once filled every corner seemed softer now somehow. Not gone completely. Just quieter. Daniel stared into his coffee for a long moment before finally speaking. I do not want things to go back to how they were. Evelyn looked at him carefully but said nothing. Daniel exhaled slowly. I miss too much already. Outside, snow slipped gently from rooftops into the streets below while warm morning light reflected across the apartment windows. Evelyn wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. Life gets busy, sweetheart. I understand that. Daniel shook his head softly. No, his voice stayed calm but steady. Being busy is not the same thing as forgetting somebody is waiting for you. Evelyn lowered her eyes briefly at those words. The apartment remained quiet except for the faint jazz station playing once again from the kitchen radio. Daniel reached into his coat pocket hanging beside the chair and pulled out his phone. Then right there at the breakfast table, he opened the family group chat and typed a message. Next Sunday dinner at Mom's apartment. Everybody comes. No excuses. Evelyn stared at the screen quietly while tears slowly gathered in her eyes again. Not painful tears this time. Softer ones. The kind that arrived when hope returned carefully after being gone too long. A moment later Melissa replied first. We will be there. Then another message appeared from Sophie. Can Grandma make the mashed potatoes? Daniel smiled faintly and looked back toward his mother. Evelyn laughed softly through tears while sunlight warmed the apartment around them. And for the first time in years, apartment 7B no longer felt like a place where someone had been forgotten. It finally felt like home again.